Hello and welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak, and let me start off by warning you that I am going to talk about the novel Huckleberry Finn in such a way that there will be spoilers, plot spoilers. So if you have not read the novel and you are thinking of it and don't want to be unsurprised when you get there because of something I have said, then you may at best skip out on this video. I finished reading it pretty early this morning and decided I needed a little time to just think about it. Well, I haven't had much time today, so I haven't done a lot of thinking, but one hopes that there be some subconscious cogitating regardless. So I've told this story a couple of times, how as a lad I read the novels written by Walter B. Gibson of The Shadow. Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The Shadow knows. Well, I've mostly talked about the Shadow in reference to his habit. And I should say that whole business with the Shadow, that comes from the radio show, but the radio show was so popular they decided to make it into a pulp magazine. And so Walter B. Gibson became the primary writer. Those pulps did not have, say, fixed authors necessarily, but Gibson wrote the majority of them, and he wrote the best ones. Basically creating the character from out of thin air, so to speak, because the Shadow on the radio was nothing but a disembodied voice. So Gibson created a whole inner sanctum for the Shadow. I think you would see it's like transmuted into something like the Batcave in the comic book era. But he would go into his inner sanctum, and so far as I know, it was just a room. Maybe it had some lab equipment, that kind of thing. And when he was working on a case, he would write down on a piece of paper just what salient facts were in his mind or whatever thoughts he was having. He would use an ink which turned invisible. So he wrote them down just for the purpose of clarifying his mind. And then after a couple minutes or whatever, they would disappear, vanish forever. And I realized since finishing Huckleberry Finn that actually I have been practicing the same sort of thing for a long time. At least for more than a decade, I have, whatever I've been reading, I will copy down paragraphs here or there and just post them. And sometimes I will put together what thoughts I am having at the moment. And I realized today that these are exactly fulfilling the same purpose that the Shadow's little notes to himself were doing. I allow my friends, my Facebook friends, to eavesdrop, so to speak, or to look over them as well. But they are not a composition fit for posterity. They're just random thoughts that I am in the process of trying to piece together. And they are intended to have no further shelf life than that, which makes it perfectly suitable a thing to be posting on Facebook. Now, I've done a little bit of that on the community page at YouTube as well. I really am much more involved with YouTube at this time than with Facebook. Facebook has this habit of showing me things that I have no interest in seeing all the time. And so what I've started doing is when that happens, and I'm not talking about advertisements. I'm perfectly fine seeing an advertisement. I'm just talking about things that they think I would be interested in. And so I just hit the block button, but I also turn off the computer and just go away from Facebook at that time. I don't know if they realize how much they are alienating their audience, but these companies never seem to. However, I like the milieu of Facebook. I think I have a more diverse crowd on Facebook than on YouTube. So I still occasionally put some of these random notes into or onto Facebook, and sometimes I'll put them on YouTube, and sometimes I'll just go back and forth without rhyme or reason. So that makes it somewhat difficult to do what I'm going to do today, which is read some of them. I thought that I would share those thoughts with you and then perhaps talk about my experience with the novel. Now, I think I have a cat about to get attacked, so hey, come here, you. Come here. Yeah, he won't attack you if you're on me. Come on. Yeah, this should be a safe zone for you. For some reason, cats, she's not going to stay. Well, then she's going to be subject to being attacked. Now, come on. Well, now she's growling at him. Excuse me. And here's the culprit about to be ejected. Okay. And as luck would have it, another one did not slip in. We have this little girl, I've shown her to you before, who is polydactyl. She lives in the bathroom because she can't stand any other cat. She hates all the other cats, and she's a wee little 6-pound thing, something like that. And so all of the other cats like to pick on her. We've had other cats that were small also, and it didn't work out that way because they had different personalities, but so it is. So I thought that I would just read some of the notes that I made and then talk about them a little bit. This is coming towards the final stretch, as I say in this first note. And I should say that I've posted some videos here and there talking about Huckleberry Finn, and God willing, this should be the last one. I was helped out when I was about a third into the book. I was just really uncomfortable with the text. And Melinda at A Web of Stories commented that she had read it earlier in the year in preparation for reading Percival Everett's James, and said the story just did not develop in any kind of a way that she cared for. It didn't really seem to go anywhere. I can't remember her exact description, but actually just that little bit of foreknowledge helped me out tremendously, because I knew that Twain is a good writer, but I think I was hoping that his book would be more of a masterpiece or more of a cohesive unity than it proved to be. Let me show you the books of his that this was the first one that I read by him 2 years ago. And I loved it. It's just a perfect work of art. Fairly short, I guess. And last year I read The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. And I had my issues with it, but it was an enjoyable read. And so I was expecting Huckleberry Finn to be at least of that caliber, and it was not. But as soon as I quit thinking that it was going to be something better than it was, I was able to just dive into the narrative. As I say, he's a master craftsman, so to speak, and every master craftsman has an off day. Now, I have not read sufficient of Twain to really know if this Huckleberry Finn mess is representative of a lot other works by him, or if it stands unique in his oeuvre. I don't know. Be that as it may, my plans are changing. I had initially planned to start this next, Was Huck Black by Shelley Fisher Fishkin, and I really like her writing. She did an introduction to this volume. This was where I think I had initially read Tom Sawyer. And she discussed Mark Twain's relationship with the institution of slavery. And so I thought that this would be very good. And I still think it will be very good, but I've decided to change plans and set it aside because my whole reaction to Huckleberry Finn was bad enough. It was like something of a bomb going off in my reading life. So I decided that I do not want to follow that with somebody else talking about the book. I want my experience to linger and not to be tampered with by any externalities. So that is what has made me decide to change plans and not read Was Huck Black. I will not get rid of it because it sounds very good, but it will have to wait for the future. And I also had said I probably would read this one next year. I've been closing out each year with a reading of Mark Twain, but it's serious enough that I may well not touch Mark Twain again. People often on BookTube will discuss monster artists. If an artist is a monster, do you still read their works if they have allegations against them? Well, I would not impute something like that to Mark Twain. However, the book Huckleberry Finn itself was disturbing enough. It also, of course, raises other issues. One being, why should you read something that is bad and that you don't like? I fell into that situation earlier in the year with Victor Hugo's Les Mis. I just did not like it. Though in his case, I could not put my finger on what it was in the 300 pages that so repelled me in the book. And it's interesting. This all may be subjective to myself. I know that a lot of people have had these magnificent, wonderful experiences with the novel Catcher in the Rye. It has meant a lot to them, and my experience was very different. So I am perfectly at ease with accepting that it may well be something in my own constitutional makeup that makes me perceive things a little bit different to the norm, or just simply different to how another person does. So I'm not sure if I will ever read Twain again after this. And I don't know if I'm going to pick up another book to close out my year with in place of Was Huck Black, or if I will just try to settle into the elements which I had promised earlier in the year that I was going to keep plugging ahead with. So the point that the notes start that I'm going to read are getting towards the end, and all there was a long interim away from the iconic story of Huck and Jim on the raft, where, well, they're still on the raft, but they've got their buddies. They've got this guy who they call the king, and they've got another guy who they call the Duke. And so the novel, for a good chunk in the center, becomes following the foibles and shenanigans of these hucksters or frauds or con men, as Twain will portray them. That's bad when you call Mark Twain Trump. So I think you see where I'm coming from. Well, I guess it was the combination of, I think Freud has a word for this. It was the combination of the con men, huckster, and frauds, and then so it's natural that instead of saying Twain, one would say Trump. Okay, we're not going to go into that topic of discussion. And so at some point, they get kind of cast off. I don't remember the details all that well of how Jim and Huck finally chuck these two fellows, but they're back on their own again. And so I was really hopeful. I wasn't exactly crossing my fingers, but I was bating my breath a little bit in the fervent wish that Twain would get things back on track and really turn it into the novel that its reputation would suggest that it is. And he did, and then he didn't. So I'm into the final stretch with Twain. Here's a quote. The doctor was an old man, a very nice, kind-looking old man when I got him up. I told him me and my brother was over on Spanish Island hunting yesterday afternoon and camped on a piece of a raft we found, and about midnight he must have kicked his gun in his dreams, for it went off and shot him in the leg, and we wanted him to go over there and fix it and not say nothing about it, nor let anybody know, because we wanted to come home this evening and surprise the folks. Who is your folks? He says. The Phelpses down yonder. Oh, he says. And after a minute he says, how'd you say he got shot? He had a dream, I says, and it shot him. Singular dream, he says. And then I commented, how American is that? A singular detail which no one today would need to mention, such as such shootings are a commonplace here. So I'm going to call him Trump again. Twain was once again really a precursor to the whole American milieu that we know so well. There's so much gunplay in the book. Sorry, back to my... But I also love how the first paragraph reminds what a great writer Twain is. No workshop would let you get away with, the doctor was, ... a very nice, kind-looking old man, unquote. But Twain does it. So you can see I'm trying to warm myself up to be in sympathy with Twain. That one is actually posted on the community tab at YouTube, but all the rest derived from Facebook. Oh no, there might be two little ones more. So this is, so I said, now I get that shirt. Every last inch of it kivered over. Perfectly stupid at the get-go, but here you understand why Twain did it, and it works. So while they were plotting the escape or trying to spring Jim from his jail, his incarceration in a shed, they come up with all these weird, goofy things that he has to keep a journal or something, but then he has to keep the journal on a shirt, which they procure for him, and he has to write it in his own blood. So his shirt is marked with blood. And so it just was the stupidest thing when you were reading it. But then at the scene where it finally comes in again, and that line that I quoted, all of a sudden you see Jim, the representative American slave, in a shirt that has been marked with stripes, so to speak, the stripes of the blood of slaves. I forget the famous quote from Lincoln from his final inaugural speech, till every drop of blood drawn from the lash of the overseer or whatever is paid for by a drop of blood drawn by the sword, something like that. And so the image seemed to me just like a physical embodiment of that idea. And so I thought, very good. I was going to say Mr. Trump again, Mr. Twain. And then I commented, in a way, he's blaming slavery, but not the people who done it. And this is real thick in the book. He absolutely is doing that. He is letting you know that slavery is not that good, but that the people who perpetrated the enslavement by routine violence were all good people. And so they are even relatives of the protagonist. I mean, everybody had relatives in the day, but so we know that slaveholders are good people. So he's in this shack, and these relatives of the protagonists have their own slaves. It's a plantation of some sort, and so these other slaves are the ones taking Jim his food and so forth. And at one point, the white woman expresses her fear for her poor boys asleep, which I read as a pointed, sympathetic reminder about African families broken up by kidnapping. Twain does, I think, in a couple of places, lament the grosser forms of cruelty inherent to the system, such as the splitting up of families. He never voices anything against the system itself or suggests that slavery in itself is wrong or that a certain class of people, meaning Black Americans, deserve to have lives without slavery. He doesn't really ever suggest anything like that. So here's the next bit, goes pretty long, and I may just try to read it all as one. Twain endorses the African slave's wish for freedom and indirectly expresses a sympathy for the families broken up. By the boys coming at the end to the family home, Twain transforms his story into an American Odyssey, better than ever Joyce did, which Joyce was not aiming for, even upholding the same virtues of cunning and lying that Homer does in his poem. It's a shame that such a great and iconic piece of American fiction should be so shabby. Moth-eaten is the adjective that comes to mind, but so it comes out with literature sometimes. If it were a better book, greatness would elude it. I still have 2 chapters ahead, but in the end, he manages to condemn slavery while upholding it, making only cursory and only the obliquest references to the slavery system, while excusing the people who perpetrated it as good people and even like family. Considered apart from the story, every bit of which is unremittingly stupid, it's a masterful performance, though not one that I can get behind. I don't know if the rest of I think there's a jump here. OMG, chapter 41 ends with a sentiment that's like something straight out of Dickens. Well, you'll have to read it or look it up. Just, as I say, reading the book so much reinforces the fact that Twain really was a master of his craft. There is no denying that. Okay, chapter 42 is stupid beyond all get out, on par with anything in the rest of the book. Jim proves himself a good N-word to the rousing acknowledgement of all by voluntarily giving himself up and becoming passive, even happy in his passivity. The white men feel he deserves some reward for giving up his life's freedom forever, so agree to stop cussing him before he is bound and chained more fiercely than ever before. The book in its entirety fails to acknowledge that the South was a kind of hermetically sealed system of containment and control of black slaves. There was almost literally no place for him to go, even if he managed to slip his shackles, not to mention the absurdity in the direction of his southbound journey. That he voluntarily gives up the prospect or possibility of freedom for the sake of little white Macaulay Culkin beggars belief. Does this make him a kind of Uncle Tom character? Tom says, "We got our canoe and made for the raft and was all safe, and Jim was a free man, and we done it all by ourselves. And wasn't it bully, Auntie?" Mistakenly believing that Jim has gotten away. But given where he was, there was no place to go. When he learns of Jim's recapture, Tom says this in the exchange: "They ain't no right to shut him up. Shove! And don't you lose a minute. Turn him loose. He ain't no slave. He's as free as any creature that walks this earth." But before you think Tom is uttering an abolitionist screed, hold on. He informs his aunt and the reader, "Old Miss Watson died 2 months ago and ... set him free in her will," thereby returning Jim's status to its proper place in the hands of white men, to give or to relinquish at will and by rights, thereby implicitly upholding and endorsing the slavery system, albeit coming teasingly close to having Tom sound like an abolitionist, and albeit having mentioned that Miss Watson, quote, was ashamed she ever was going to sell him down the river, unquote. So, the last 2 months or 3 months, perhaps the whole journey of Jim's flight from the hands of the law, the hands of his pursuers, it turns out that he had been made a free man, and all of this chase, all of this adventure was a game invented on the part of Tom Sawyer for the fun of it. He liked the chase, and even all those days or weeks or whatever it was in solitary confinement for Jim, eating the worst of the worst food. It was all part of a gag, so to speak. And this is routine in the world of Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn, where it is not thought twice to fake your own death, that kind of thing. People do that. So all along from the beginning, I kept referring to the river journey by Huck and Jim as a river, a journey on the river into La La Land, because it's entirely a journey into a fantasy world. There's not a modicum of reality here. Twain is so keen on softening the edges of slavery, of ameliorating the experience of it. That is a prime target in his writing, perhaps because he did not want to offend his potential readership. And I am sure that also, well, I'm not sure, but as it came to pass, that was what the Red Badge of Courage did as well. So this whole journey that we think of as our iconic image of the man and the boy on the raft, they are heading south, and Twain even remarks in some point on the absurdity of that, suggesting that they will take a steamship or something and go up north, maybe. But it's mentioned once so that it's in there, but then it's dropped, and there is no thought at all. And so the release of Jim, like, just because he walks out of a shack, he's a free man. No, he ain't. And that was not how slavery worked. And you could even be a free man with your papers, and you better be darn careful about who you talk to, who you associate with. Probably best if you have some good, staunch white men accompanying you down into the deep south, because, well, I think I touch on it more. Yeah, the next one. Actually, Jim has been free for a while, a fact concealed by Tom because he wanted the adventure of it. But actually, Jim wasn't free at all. He was free only in words, wasn't he? Which perfectly explains why we had to have the civil rights movement. Okay, finished. So Huckleberry Finn is unequivocally a pro-slavery document. I hadn't expected that. And that is the great sadness for me to come out of this book. It's a book that has been on the syllabus for many, I think, high school or perhaps even younger than that, grammar school class, I don't know. And the objection is made here and there because of the extensive use of the N-word, but it's a lot more devious than that. The Twain mentions here and there that a black man might get lynched. But all in all, he leaves the sort of lost cause fantasy of the South, where slaves were happy to be slaves and were happy to have the influence of white people and were happy to do all their labor for free. He leaves that idea completely intact. For one instant, he teased you with the thought that Tom was going to utter something in an abolitionist vein, but then it turned out to be nothing of the sort. So he was very meticulous in constructing his novel, and I don't doubt that he knew what he was doing. I think he mapped it out. And I'm not going to impute any nefarious motives to Twain beyond just that he wanted a book that would sell. That may well be all that it was. But the consequence of it is really a blot on American literature, unfortunately. It is, in its way, a great book, but it is really an awful book. It is really poorly done. It's shabby. It's composed of so many scenes of filler. And again, the comparison I made early on with Cervantes' Part 2 of Don Quixote still holds. There are a lot of scenes thrown in just for the yucks of it that carry the plot nowhere. They are just filler. And they even espouse a kind of nasty humor. And that is where the first volume of Don Quixote fared so much better than its sequel, or Part 2 as it has come down to us. So, and I say that because Shelley Fisher Fishkin might tell me when eventually I read the book that Twain was ultimately, in retrospect, a supporter of the abolitionist cause. I mean, it's easy, of course, to support something like that in retrospect. I don't know how much he supported it while slavery was ongoing. He was raised in a situation where he was sympathetic to the institution, but he was also humane enough so that he did not see the enslaved Negro population of the United States as something other than human. He was too humane and too genuine to do something like that. And of course, I am reminded of his work, King Leopold's Soliloquy. Not a lot of people went out of their way to condemn what King Leopold was doing in the Congo, and Twain did. I think Conan Doyle also wrote something, and I have it, and I can't remember. One of them is better than the other, and it's been so long since I've read either of them that I don't remember. But it is to his lasting credit that he did come out and write this piece, publish this piece, and condemn Leopold and his Congo Free State. None of us is a perfect example of humanity. None of us is without our flaws. We are all a mixed bag. And so Twain very much was. The only thing is, for me, at this point, I am not sure how much I need to go back to his writing ever again, even though A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court has a very good reputation, as do so many of his other books. But I don't read just to read, and as I've been trying to improve my reading ability, part of that has entailed reading books that I don't like. So whereas for most of my life I would have looked at Huckleberry Finn and just decided it was not for me and passed it by, this time I did the deep dive and read it. Now, I think if you're thinking about reading this, one of my friends on BookTube said that my talking about how bad it was just makes him want to read it the more. And I think if you plan to read the book, it is well to start with Tom Sawyer. I think Tom Sawyer is the better book. It's a more innocent book. It's a less convoluted and contorted book. But I don't think that the slaveholder could maintain his slaves without convoluted contortions of morality. And I believe that to write a book which depicts their society as benign also requires those convoluted contortions. So I will leave that there and return no more to Huckleberry Finn, possibly no more to Mark Twain. Thank you very much for stopping by my channel.